also have two additional panelists. We have Per Lundmark from ABB. He's actually from a recent acquisition that ABB made called CGM, which does some very interesting things with control room design that you saw at Michael's presentation. And also Matthew Wells of GE. So everybody come up and have a seat. I got to get my iPad.
For the record, I love the color magenta.
You and a lot of other people in the industry, I think, love that. So we do want to take questions from the audience, but I do have some starter questions, just to get things going here. And I think a lot of what we talked about today is really technology stuff, and it's very cool technology. Don't get me wrong. I love technology. If I didn't, I wouldn't be in this business. And we did touch on some of the business issues, but I'd like to delve into that a little bit more. And anybody can take this question initially, but what do you feel are the top business issues that are being addressed by these advancements in new HMI design and new control room design?
So maybe I'll take a crack at that. I think a lot of people, when they think about downtime in a plant, they tend to think about equipment downtime. But a lot of studies have shown that operators themselves, the time it takes them to figure out and resolve problems contributes directly to downtime. So I think anything time we talk about ergonomics and high performance HMI, it's all around speeding the operator's response to abnormal conditions, and that translates directly into dollars.
Can we get some volume on Michael's microphone here?
Oh, is it better? So the thing that comes to my mind, if you think about critical for operators, there are two situations. 3 Mile Island, everybody knows that one. There was an alarm hidden in a different corner that was missed. The other one that was very close to my home is when an Airbus 380 had a major malfunction or a disaster with one of the engines. And Qantas was very fortunate to have 2 very experienced crews in the cockpit, because one crew was flying, the other one was kind of witnessing. If they wouldn't have had those 2 crews, they would have crashed the plane. So think about that. And so it was a big piece of feedback towards Airbus that they had to redesign some of their interfacing. Half of the crew was basically looking at alarms, shifting what was priority, what was not priority. So if they wouldn't have had that situation, so for me, going back, if you have a single crew, you have to make sure that the system provides the right information to the crew to make the right actions. So abnormal situation management.
Is it on? Yeah. As I said earlier when I was talking, the systems have a lot of power these days, and I think this is an opportunity we have to let the system help the operator. So, coming back to what you said about abnormal situations, the whole idea of, the system thinking for the operator, coming back to some of the things that went on this morning, some of the cognitive stuff is use the system to help the operator, not to confuse the operator. So that's the opportunity we have.
Okay. Yes. I think what Michel here said earlier, to put more effort into the beginning, start early to plan for your operation, your new control room, your HMI, and also to continue longer. Because a lot of times my experience is that you put a lot of effort to building your plant, and then at some point the project is over. But that's really where it starts. That's where the operation is going to run the plant for maybe another 15, 20 years, which might correspond to about 95% of the life cycle. And that's where you really should put your effort into a plan for that, so that you can run safer, more safer, and with more productivity, which turns into dollars.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good piece of advice, and we often offer that same piece of advice to people that are adopting new technologies, especially on a new project. You want to start that very early, in the planning stages, but before even before the control room is built, before the planning starts, you really have to start early. And I think going back to the business issue, this is a lot more than just cool graphics, right? And a nice, fancy control room. There really is business value behind this technology, and I think a lot of times people don't realize the business value that's actually there. And one other interesting thing I thought that Michael mentioned was when you brought some of the younger people in the room and showed them the new control room. They were very impressed by it, and they said this would be a place that I would want to work. And not just the control room, but also the graphics and the displays and everything. How powerful of a tool do you think these new graphics and control room designs are in terms of being able to, attract this next generation of workers that we really desperately need? Any comments on that?
I think that probably really comes, at the next stage, right? I mean, you talked about, your current work within the ISA is around mobility. Really the new age of workforce that's coming in, they demand mobile access to the data and the technologies. I mean, the first time I ever put my son in front of a computer, he kept trying to touch the screen. It was really difficult to explain to him he had to use a mouse. So I think I think the graphics do play a key part, but I do think it's access to the data and the technology on a mobile device, which is really what's going to drive that, adoption with a new age of workers.
Okay, I also like to add the fact that the younger generation today are more concerned also about their health, and we're going to see a big change in this area, where the operators will be more monitored, also how they are acting throughout the shift. We talked about 12-hour shifts, and we know for sure that sitting for 12 hours is bad for you. And recent research showed that if you can stand up like 15-20 minutes every 2 hours, you can lower the risk for heart disease and so on into half. And this is an area where I think we need to do much better to attract the younger generation. I mean, almost everyone today are keeping a very, very close eye on how they are eating, sleeping, running, jogging, and walking, and everything, and keep track of all that. And this will be a very important area to show that we really care about you as a human being also during your work hours, because working 8 or 12 hours a day, that corresponds to quite a lot of hours throughout your lifetime, and you want to live longer. Simple.
So the question is, an operator comes into the control room and it sees it's a dark cubby hole and very poor screens. Now you go to the production leader. Which type of office does he have, right? The corner office, nice windows, beautiful desk. What is wrong here in this picture? So I think, investing for the operators to make sure that they can be productive. And I think, all the guidelines are out there, but, making sure it has kind of a wow effect from, hey, can I work here? Fantastic. So it's not just the production leader that has a nice office, but also the operators are all proud of their environment and keeping and maintaining it like that.
That's a good point. We certainly seem to pay more attention to our office space, I think, a lot of times than the control room. Jeremy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think when it comes to new people coming in, obviously graphics are incredibly important. What you said about environment's incredibly important. The thing that I keep thinking about is once I explain to them the responsibility that they have for operating this system, and then I show them their tool set and how hard the navigation is, once again, about integrating all that. That's really my big concern, is that they're gonna sit there and look around and say, how am I supposed to do everything that you want me to do with what you're giving me? And that's what, we talk about that quite a bit. And I'll echo, the first time my kids get to a screen, the first thing they wanna do is just start sliding it and making it bigger, because everything's a touch screen for them.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. But why don't we wait for a microphone, because it's going to be real hard for us to all hear you. And if you don't mind just telling us who you are real quick.
Yeah, I'm Carl Cherney from Georgia Pacific. This question to Michael. I have a, from your picture, it looks like it's blast through a building, so it must be pretty close to the process. How far could you move it to? I mean, could you move it 10 miles, 100 miles, and if not 100 miles, 1,000 miles?
The question is, how far can you put the process of the control room away from the process? So, and there are some guidelines. When you do your LOPA reviews, there is kind of a time for the operator to react. And sometimes it's through the automation system, and sometimes it's through the field. So that determines how far you can be away. In our situation, we have little buggies, and it takes the operator 3 to 5 minutes to go from the control room to the plant. So it is far away as far as if you just walk, it may be 10 minutes. With the buggy, it's a couple of minutes. But I think so that the LOPA reviews help you to determine how far you can be away.
Could that be a different? Could that be a different person, the one that operates it and one that gets in the buggy?
Yeah, for sure. But your default situation, all your operators are in the control room. How long does it take to go out there and do that action? And so you cannot assume that operators are 24/7 in the plant. And so there will be 24/7 operators in the control center. And then how long does it take him or her to get there? Does it answer your question? Not really.
This is Scott Carter from Georgia Pacific. I guess the question I have is, this is a significant investment, making that very large control room, making it blast proof, etc. Did y'all ever look at automating the process such that you didn't need the control room to start with?
Well, we looked at that. We looked at two options: grow into an existing control room that has still space for 1.5 new plants. So not 2, so we had to expand the control room and do some stuff. And we also considered, given the state of technology, can we do without a control room? And I think you can do without a control room for a period of the time when the plant really runs smooth. But when you're basically in commissioning and startup mode, it becomes a different animal, because you need to have a lot of interfacing towards the process. So that's really where you need to have the control room. Does it answer your question?
If I could just make a comment, I think the point being maybe is that it depends on the complexity of the process and how quickly it can deviate and go out of control. Because we have a customer that does remotely monitor one of their plants from a different country, but at the same time, it's probably not like I know it's not a giant petrochemical plant, that could blow up if something goes wrong. It's got enough sort of automatic safety procedures in place that if something did really happen, it would totally shut down. But the latency in the process is enough that they can manage it remotely and then dispatch the workers to address any issues.
Yeah, that's a debate that we continuously hear in the industry, the big centralized control room concept on-site versus, remote operations. We do see a drive to remote operations, like I mentioned before, and I think that's partly driving a lot of these advancements in HMI, because you have these people that are sitting in remote operation centers that have to keep track of assets that are all over the world. So, and I'm sure Dow's probably doing some of that.
If you think about it, in the past we would have built 3 control rooms for 3 different plants. Now it's 1 centralized control room for almost for a whole site. So that makes a big difference. And maybe what I mentioned so how far can it be away from the process? LOPA reviews, layer of protection analysis, where you look at all your scenarios, your business scenarios, and your risks that you run. And then based on how you can mitigate those actions, you have certain actions. And in those actions, you define how quickly you have to do that. And that determines how far you can be away from your process.
Bob Zapata with Tesoro. Michael, did you conduct any situational awareness studies before you settled on the final graphic design, whether it be the object, the function of that, and then in addition to that, how did you incorporate SIS type displays, or did you have a separate panel for that as well?
We run the 800XA system, and we have the SIS system integrated with our BPCS. So that's the starting point. We did some analysis, but we also base it on previous crackers that we have run like that. So we use a lot of that basic information to go forward. So we kind of step on the shoulders of previous projects to go forward. So we don't redo all the analysis, but some of it. Every project will do an extensive LOPA review, and basically define all our SIS loops and functionality along with that. And then in that review, you see what you need to do.
We have a gentleman over here.
Good morning. I have two questions. One is, I think Larry touched it at the beginning, is integrated operation. So I'm aware of the ISA 101, and is there any talk or discussion about have some guideline on creating HMI for integrated operation center? So I'm talking about monitoring multiple facilities, maybe across supply chain. So that's my first question. Second question is, we embark on this journey about the new HMI, but what we constantly find is what Jeremy had touched on is we constantly have to balance between where we want the HMI to be versus the system capability. And that's a constant struggle, and end of the day, we have multiple different type of high performance HMI. Any thoughts to that?
Regarding the integrated facilities and across the supply chain, again, we've looked at that kind of thing, but the standard itself is not designed to standardize that kind of operation. That'll come out in the technical reports. We did look at performance management of multiple facilities and remote facilities and that kind of stuff, but in the end, we decided to take specific examples out, and that will come out in the technical reports.
Anyone else care to comment on that last point, or?
Jeremy says he feels some of your pain. I think what's great about this discussion is that by highlighting, when you asked how many people here had heard of ISA 101, I mean, a shockingly few number of people had, right? So the goal here is to educate everybody on the standards so that the technology can then start to evolve to make it much easier to implement. And I don't think even now the standard is, it's locked down, but I think there's lots of ways that technology can evolve even further to continue on the theme of what ISA 101 is starting, right? So it'll be an evolution. That's why I invited Morris here, because I know that most people don't know about ISA 101. It's very important as far as the standard goes, and I'm glad you're all here, to hear the message today. We probably have time for one more comment or question, because we have lunch rapidly approaching. If anybody has one last quick question. Right here in the front row.
Could we compare and contrast the CFR and the ISA 101 standard? What are three key similarities or differences between the CFR and the ISA 101?
So this might answer that. The fact that I'm really not familiar with the ISA standard, but very familiar with CFR. And then I was actually interested in talking to you because it doesn't reference the ISA, but it does reference API RP 1165. So I think that would probably be more interesting to compare and contrast those two things. Would that be fair?
And that's something that, you know, I'm familiar with 101, but not with the CFR. So
Yeah. So there you go.
so it seems we need to have some discussions and you know, get in some. There are multiple. That is the big issue, and it has been the big issue with getting 101 out. Is there are so many guidelines and standards for HMIs just across the world. There's an ISO version. There's you know, there are different European standards. There's the NORSOC standards in Norway.
Yeah,
and
NORSOC,
so there's so in the end we've just kind of planted a stake in the ground, and you know, that stake can change, but it's a stake in the ground that people have been asking for over years. So but we do need to compare and contrast some of the other things that are out there.
Yeah, I think the good thing is the ISA standards evolve, you know, so
Yes.
that's a good thing. Well, I think we're at the end. I want to thank you guys for your participation here today. Let's have a big hand for our presenters.